Today on the Principal's Office.
Because representation matters. Say it louder for the people in the back. Representation matters, especially when it comes to politics. Well, hello, everybody. You caught me in the middle of a great book for a great show. The book you caught me in the middle of is one of my favorite books of all time, a book called So Much by Trish Cook, illustrated by Helen Oxenberry. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of reading books, not only to your child, but as they grow up with your child. So to start with and kind of paint the story for you, I want to present a couple of different scenarios for you. First, let's take a look at scenario 1, which would mean that for the last year, your child has been out of school altogether and won't be returning to school until August of 2021. As a family, you've made a decision that we're just going to keep them out for the rest of the year. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2 has your child going back to school in March of 2021, and you are a little bit aware that the 12 months he or she was out of school, they weren't exposed to a lot of learning. Even though that they were on their computer, they didn't do very much. Scenario 3 has your child completing assignments and participating in live lessons every day, but you sense they are still not where they should be. Well, in each of these scenarios, there's a choice to improve the education of your child, and it has nothing to do with sending them back to school and everything to do with what they do at home with you now. It's important that when you hear the terms learning loss or summer loss or achievement gap or falling behind students, all have one thing in common, and that one commonality is actually you, the parent. As schools prepare to envelop your child with offerings of summer programs and summer schedules, just to intervene to catch your child up, this may not be the best decision for you and your family or for your family time. So what do? Well, first, remember, it's important that you know literacy, reading, understanding, comprehension has always been an important part of the Black family and the Black community. Black literary societies, groupings, when Black folk came together to read and to learn, go all the way back. They were called intellectual feasts. In the early 1800s, Black people saw the need to read not just as being tied to learning how to do something or being tied to being seen as smart. They saw the need to read as being tied to liberation and the power. It was about self-empowerment, self-determination, and self-foundation. Reading was the foundation of all learning and why so many Black people risked their lives to learn to do so. In one of my other favorite books by Gholdy Muhammad, a book called Cultivating Genius, she explores 10 lessons that we can learn from our ancestors who were a part of these Black literary societies. She actually devotes an entire chapter in her book to the topic of Black literary societies in the early 1800s. And I'd like to share some of those lessons with you today before we take our first break. In her book, Gholdy talks about During these Black literary societies, literacy learning encompassed reading and writing skills as well as social and cultural practices. See, it just wasn't learning about how to read and how to write for the purpose of writing and reading, but it was about how that is important in understanding society and the cultural norms. And think about that in the context of today, why reading is so important for our children. It's not just about being able to pass a test. It's just as important to be able to understand the world that is happening around them. The second thing that Goldie points us to is that literacy was the foundation and was central to all disciplinary learning. They often brought in many different subject areas to help with an understanding of culture and society as a whole. It wasn't just enough to read the book, but it was about understanding what other content areas could be brought in to learning and understanding what the material had for us today. And that a lot of times differs from what we have today. The third thing that Goldie points out in her book is that literacy learning involved print and oral literacy, and these were developed simultaneously. A tradition among Black people involved reading, writing, and oral literacy layered upon their understanding of the world. And what that really takes us to is knowing that when there are popular events and activities happening around us, being able to translate that in a way that we can really comprehend and understand. And that you can do that through storytelling, not just by reading. And so that was an important lesson that, again, our ancestors in the 1800s saw when it comes to reading and really understanding. One of the fourth things that she points out was that literacy instruction was responsive to the social events and people of the time. So the social environment especially dictated the topics they chose to read, write, and speak about. So whatever was happening in their community, whatever happened in their environment, they wanted to know more about that subject. And that's what they read about, that's what they studied about, that's what they spoke about. Literacy was tied to joy, love, and all sorts of fulfillment. It wasn't just tied to a test score. There was joy and love, and both to improve their hearts as well as their minds. These are our ancestors, again, in the early part of our development in this country as a people. Reading was always important. Learners of different literacies and experiences came together to learn from one another, using each other's ways of knowing as resources for new learning. Learning wasn't something you kept to yourself. As soon as you learned it, you were willing to pass it on. You wanted them to know as much as you did because it was important for us as a people to grow and to learn together. Literacy learning was highly collaborative, and a shared learning space was created. Learners had a social responsibility to one another. Same thing that I mentioned. It wasn't for the sole purpose of you improving yourself, but improving the community as a whole. Our Black literary societies function then as they should today. Literacy learning involved reading and writing diverse text genres and authorships. So it wasn't just one author that was read or one person that had all the information. They enjoyed hearing from a variety of different authors across several different genres of writing to understand fully the different topics that they were interested in. Literary learning also focused on how to reclaim the power of authority in language through critical literacy. Language was a means to assert one's existence as well as one's voice and stance on political issues. Our ancestors knew that it was important for them to learn the language to be able to, in fact, use their own voice to stand up for the rights of their community and their family. And finally, Goldie says that identity and intellectual development were cultivated alongside literacy learning. In other words, Black people read and wrote so often as to make sense of their individual and collective identities as Black people while gaining new information. whatever they read, whatever they studied, they put into a context of what does this mean about who we are as a people? How can we translate this information into sharing who we are, our identity, individually and collectively? So Black literary societies have been around since the early 1800s and have been a part of what makes it so important for us to continue our opportunities to read, to write, and to study more today than ever before. And when we come back, we're going to take a look at some of the questions and answers that you've given us about reading books to children. And before the show is over today, we're actually going to give you a great list of books that you can read with and to your child. Don't go away.
Oh, her dramatic walk to the microphone.
Hey, Black Child by County Color. Hey, Black Child, do you know who you are? Who you really are? Do you know you can be where you want to be if you try to be what you can be? Hey, Black Child, do you know where you're going? Where you're really going? Do you know you can learn what you want to learn if you try to learn what you can learn? Hey, Black Child, do you know you are strong? I mean really strong? Do you know you can do what you want to do if you try to do what you can do? Hey, Black Child, be what you can be, learn what you must learn, do what you can do, and tomorrow your nation will be what you want it to be.
Today we're talking about the importance of reading to your child, and today we want to share with you some of the questions you've asked about reading to your child and what that actually looks like. We take it for granted that reading comes naturally to everyone and reading to or with your child the same, and that's not always the case. Before the break, we talked about the long history of African Americans in this country and literary societies and the importance they placed on education, not just from a skills point of view, but for one that involved the uplifting of the entire Black community, and one that the many risked their lives to take upon themselves. With that, today we want to answer some of your questions, so let's just jump straight into questions you've asked about reading. The first one being, when's the right time to start reading to your child? So here's what I'll say. Today, if your child is already here with us, today is the right time to start. It is never too early. But if your child's not here yet, then as soon as you are announced as pregnant, that is when you begin reading to your child.
Peyton can already write?
Yes, and read.
And read at 3 years old?
Yeah, she's been reading since she was about 18 months.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you do to get her to reading at 18?
It happened before she even came out the womb. I was a YouTube fanatic, so I played a lot of phonics DVDs and songs for her, and I would let her listen to them in my stomach for like 20 minutes a day. And then as she came out, we just exposed her to a lot of sight words, a lot of language, like our bathroom is filled with sight words on our wall. So just constantly feeding her into the phonics and words and literature.
Yes.
Every single day you read to your child in the womb and when they are welcomed into this world. It is never too early to start reading to your child. And again, if your child is already here and maybe you've never developed a habit or a practice of doing that, start today. Our second question says, do the books need pictures to be interesting? And the answer to that is no. It is your voice and your own enthusiasm about what you're reading that can make it an exciting and interesting experience for your child. It doesn't have to have pictures or illustrations to do that. If you change your voice and if you are excited by what you read, then your child will be interested as well. And it's important that you practice all of those skills that you learned in school about using your voice as a tool when reading to make it exciting for your child. Question number 3, who should select the book? Well, I'll say that your child should always have choices. So you may be the one who selects the books that your child gets to choose from. But ultimately, it's really cool when your child chooses the book. What happens if they choose the same book over and over again? That means they love that book. If you see me, I'll read so much every day if I can. I love this book. There is nothing wrong with having a favorite book and reading it over and over. And actually, studies have shown it helps you improve as a reader. It practices your fluency. Many times children can memorize an entire book just because they read it over and over again for several nights in a row. Question number 4, should you alternate reading sentences or pages with your child? Maybe there's no right or wrong answer to that. You might want to share a read with your child where they read a sentence and then you read a sentence, but sometimes it can be a little bit choppy. So you might try chorally reading together, both of you reading the sentences at the same time, or you may alternate on pages. Either way, there is no right or wrong way to do it. It's important that you bond during this experience. So whatever is comfortable after you've tried several different methods is what matters most. Should I ask questions about the book? It's great if you do, but it's okay if you don't. If you don't ask questions, that is perfectly okay. Because a lot of times stopping to ask questions is what actually bores kids to death. They think, why do I have to keep answering questions? Why can't I just enjoy the book? And as a matter of fact, research tells us that when children read for fun, they actually learn much more than when they're forced to read for a reason like school or for an assignment. So if you choose to ask questions, make sure that those questions are open-ended, meaning you can't just answer yes or no. Instead of asking who's the main character, describe the main character for me. What did you like best about the main character in the story? Was the main character somebody you would like to have as a friend? Why? Tell me more. How much time should we spend reading each day? This is a good question because I remember as a parent reading to my child, sometimes 10 minutes seemed like a lifetime, and other days 30 minutes wasn't enough. It'll be the same for you. You really want to set aside 30 minutes every day to spend with your child engaging with text, but that doesn't mean you're always going to spend the whole 30 minutes reading.
That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're going to do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh, yeah. Right, don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't bring it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. And then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? But don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
You could only spend 10 minutes a night, and some nights it could be a lot longer. That's up to you. But plan for 30 minutes a night. Don't make it an obligation. And also it's important to remember to read every single day of the week. Don't take a break. Taking a break makes it seem like work and something that we have to take off from. We don't want to do that. Are books the only way to read? My child hates to see a book coming. And the answer to that question is no. Text or anything that's been produced for us to interpret. So it can be a book. It can actually be a billboard. It can actually be a newspaper. It can be a piece of art. Anything that was created for you to understand is what text is. So it doesn't just have to come from a book. So tonight in reading time, maybe you have a famous drawing, or maybe it's an art picture drawn by someone that you want to read. You want to interpret. Spend some time looking at it and talking about it and thinking about what it says to you. Interpreting and constructing meaning is what literacy is all about. So it doesn't just have to be a book. When you're riding down the street and you see all the street signs, say them out loud. All the McDonald's signs and storefronts. Say what you see out loud. That's reading. When you're in church on Sunday and we open up those hymn books, a lot of times when children don't have a hymn book in front of them, I've seen adults say, oh, it's okay, you don't know how to read. And we don't ever want to say that to a child. Anytime they are putting meaning to what's in front of them, they are reading, and we want to encourage them to do that. When should you stop reading to your child? At what age? Never. Okay, so if you're like me and you have older children, my children are 21 and 19, I still see a video on YouTube or they see something on TikTok and they'll bring it to us to look at because it's funny or hilarious or has deeper meaning and they want to show it. Well, in the same way, when you find an article or you find a story or there's a part in a book that has meaning for you, you want to share that with your child, no matter how old they are. Remember, literary societies taught us that reading had meaning and purpose for our entire life. It never ended. Lifelong learners. How will reading help my child boost their creativity? Reading develops creativity, and studies have actually proven that out. It's all about the imagination. Reading takes you into so many parts of your mind that you've never even used before. Reading a good book can take you anywhere in the world and make you think about any topic that maybe you never discussed before. And last but not least, where do I start? When we come back from the break, we're going to look at some great books with some really great titles that are just for you and your child as you learn how to navigate reading to your child and reading with your child for the first time.
Did you know that the word alma mater comes from the Latin meaning nurturing mother? One of our primary objectives at Simmons College of Kentucky is to nurture late bloomers. So it doesn't matter if you struggle through high school just to graduate or even if you earn your GED. We don't look at a student's past, we look at their potential. Simmons College of Kentucky, creating the next generation of thinkers.
Want to introduce you to some other books, and we want you to know that children soak up everything. They're like sponges. So now is never a better time, or now is the best time to start reading with your child if you haven't already done so. Taking in all they hear and all the lessons that they learn, your child will be better because of it. Help your child boost their brain development and foster your relationship with your child at the same time. So today in this last segment of the show, we want to introduce you to the importance of reading. And I'm not just talking about school textbooks, we're talking about reading for fun. New research, as I shared, reveals that students who immerse themselves in reading for pleasure outside of school, at home, have stronger language skills, verbal skills, and creative skills, nourishing their capacity for empathy, and even helping them reduce prejudice against stigmatized groups. When you read about other people and their experiences, you automatically develop empathy. So over the next few minutes, I'll be sharing with you books with Black protagonists, an important goal that everyone should embrace. When children feel represented by the faces and the places they see in books, their hopes, their dreams, and their aspirations become attainable. And even when white children are immersed in stories where Black people take the lead, it helps them understand that creating a world that elevates all voices doesn't mean they're losing out on their chance to share in the conversation. It's really a win-win. So with that in mind, we are sharing some books with you that celebrate and represent Black boys and girls. And many of these books teach universal lessons, and they're full of fun stories that everybody can enjoy. Today on the screen, you'll see our first book is a book that I personally have not had the chance to read, but I'll be buying it. The book is called Baby Dance, and it is all about a father and his baby girl and how he soothes her when she gets fussy. The next book we have is Baby Loves Gravity. So this book by Ruth Spiro is fun entry into science. It's about a little black boy and his faithful puppy companion who help teach you the complex concepts like gravity to little kids. Have you ever heard of Goodnight Moon? Well, if you have, then you'll love Goodnight Lab. This time we see a scientist saying goodnight to all the equipment in her lab. Another book that we'll look at is Maya, My First Maya Angelou. Racism, as we know, is a tough topic for any child and any parent to talk about with their child. But sometimes using the real experiences of historical figures can help. The next, it's a whimsical book called The Word Collector. In this book, Jerome travels around town collecting new words and storing them in his ever-growing set of scrapbooks. Our next book, it's called Crown, an ode to the fresh cut. This barber shop is a historical place in our community, and in this book, it's the place where you go for a shape-up, but you come out looking like a king. Next, we have Earth Mother, is a look at a beautiful African woman in a classic folk tale about the circle of life. Earth Mother, beautifully illustrated as well. You've probably heard of this book. It's called Grace for President. Because representation matters, the little black girl named Grace learns all about the importance of voting. More importantly, she learns about how the American electoral college system works. Our next book, you should meet Katherine Johnson. If you love the book Hidden Figures, you'll love this book. It's part of the You Should Meet series. Next is Martin's Big Words. You probably know that this book is about Martin Luther King, who changed the world with his words. One of my favorites, Big Mamas. We have more in common than what divides us. And in this case, many parents can relate to taking their children to the country for the summer to visit family or to spend time with their grandparents. Donald Cruz in Big Mamas. Next is Googles by Ezra Jack Keats. No one likes a bully, and in this story, Peter, Archie, and Peter's dog, Willie, find some unexpected treasure in the form of an old motorcycle goggles, and they have to use them to protect themselves from the neighborhood bully. Art from the Heart, and in this book, we learn about American folk artist Clementine Hunter. She was born during Reconstruction era in the South, but her artwork is really a snapshot of what life on a plantation was like. 13 ways of looking at black boys. You know how important it is that we see our black boys with joy, and one of the ways that Tony Medina does that is by painting a vivid picture that drives home the reality that it's unfair and incorrect to treat any group of people as they were not as special as another. And last but not least, again, I can't say enough, So Much by Trish Cook, illustrated by Helen Oxenberry, all about how special it is in the African American family to show love to one another. I hope that you've enjoyed the show today. I hope you've learned something that will help you and help your child be the very best they can. If you've learned anything, I hope you've learned the value of education. We love you. As always, thank you, and to God be the glory.